Are we marching towards global recession? Is the recession a myth or a reality? Let us discuss. The views expressed are totally my personal, not to hurt anybody. Now, what basically is recession? Recession is a major decline in the general economic activity in a particular region. It can be limited to one country or it can spread across the world. Two consecutive quarters of economic decline as shown in the GDP along with the rise in unemployment is basically termed as recession. Now, what is GDP? GDP is the gross domestic product of a country. As to how much do we grow? Right, supposingly I have a business of 500 crores per year and the next year I am earning 520 crores. So my business is increasing. If you talk about my GDP personally, it has increased. What if my margin falls over from 500 crores to 470 crores? In this case, my personal GDP is going down. So this is how we calculate the GDP of the whole nation. It was just an example. Now, if two consecutive quarters of any country show a decline in GDP, consecutive they should be, that we can say that the country is progressing towards recession because the growth, they have shown the negative growth. Now, negative growth here means that less work, less productivity has been faced by the country. So the government also earns less money. So the GDP has gone down. As per the National Bureau of Economic Research, recession is a decline in the economic activity throughout the country, spread across that economy, which lasts more than a few months, which is also reflected in the real GDP, sales, real income, employment, industrial production, and the wholesale retail. To sum up, we can say that the real GDP falls, so do the sales and the real income. There is a rise, clear rise in unemployment, industrial production goes down, and wholesale retail also falls. So this is what we term as recession. Now, several economies right now, they are staring at recession, which includes the United States of America, the United Kingdom, South Korea, Canada, Australia, and of course the Eurozone, which is also called the Euro area. It is basically the monetary union of 19 member states of the European Union that have adopted euro as the primary currency and the sole legal tender. So at present, we can say that these big economies, they all may be staring at recession. Now the question arises, will these nations dip into recession within the next year? Is it marching at such a fast pace? Now, what factors are causing recession? See, in the last 2 years, inflation has doubled in 37 advanced nations. This is a big alarm. I repeat, 37 countries, they are witnessing double inflation rate. Now, what is the Apex Bank trying to do? They want to control this inflation. They are entering into open market operations in order to absorb the excess currency. The central bank sells the government bonds, which increases the interest rates and discourages the borrowing. But I would like to say that these measures take a long time to show the effect. It is not a 101 basis that these measures will show you the effect. See, a little inflation is good. It is good for the country. It is good for the world also. What you were able to buy in the year 1947, obviously you will not be able to buy in the year 2022. If the prices are rising, this shows development of the nation as well as of the world. But price rise at a very high pace, this is not good. If it is alarming rate, this is not good. Now, what does basically the countries, the governments want to do? Government wants to keep inflation lesser than the GDP growth. I mean to say the GDP growth of the economy should be higher than the rate of inflation in that country. If the inflation is higher than the country's growth rate, then we are at a big risk. We are marching towards recession. So what do all the governments want to do basically is to keep it. What? Inflation should be lesser than the GDP growth. Then everything is going smoothly. We can be facing recession if the things happen otherwise. Now, one of the basic causes of marching towards recession can be overheated economy. What is overheated economy is the one that has experienced prolonged period of good economic growth. We are showing growth and growth every year, and this leads to high level of inflation, okay, which is accompanied by increase in consumer wealth. So the economy becomes overheated. Basically, they want to say that every year you are facing good growth, good GDP. It keeps on happening every year, consecutive year, and inflation rises, then the economy gets overheated. And this is actually what is happening right now. There exists an imbalance between the demand and supply. Demand is high and the supply is still struggling to meet it. This point indicates towards recession. So we can conclude that we are living in an overheated economy where the demand is quite high. Now, why is the demand high? We must have seen that during lockdown, the demand was restricted. We were restricted to our homes. You were in your home and I was in my home. So the demand of the oil prices, demand of various other commodities, it was limited. The supply was able to balance the demand. But now what is happening? The demand is so high because we have been experiencing the growth. People have funds in their hands and the supply is not able to match that demand. There rises the problem. Now, why is the supply not able to reach the demand factor? Because we know that the war in Ukraine, the war has put lot many sanctions on Russia. And now Russia is not a small economy. It is a very big country, very big economy. If you stop Russia from exporting the items, everybody will be getting affected. There will be a lot of difference in other nations as well. The rate of the oil is surging high. The demand is high, the supply is not meeting it, the oil rates are high, so it's getting affected. If you stop one supplier, the supply will go down. This is what is happening. The oil prices are going high because the supply has gone down. Next. See, next point is the asset bubble. What is an asset bubble? Asset bubble happens when the price of an asset like the stock, the bonds, the real estate or other commodities rises at a fast pace for no clear reason to justify the price spike. Please listen it very carefully. Whenever we see the development in one country, the prices rise. But when I'm talking about the asset bubble, I'm talking about the price of a particular asset which goes at a very high pace and there is no reason why the price has gone high for that particular asset. You cannot specifically mention that reason. No doubt the prices of other articles are also going up, but price of that particular asset goes up at a very sharping speed. This is the asset bubble. It is normal to monitor the price rise or fall over the time. Sometimes the prices overshoot and sometimes they undershoot. The fundamentals of demand and supply proceed. So what I'm trying to say is that the demand and supply of a particular commodity do determine the prices of that very commodity. But when we talk about asset bubble, this supply and demand does not function. Unnecessarily the price goes up and you're not able to make out why did it go up. Now, why is a bubble different from the prices of certain goods overshoot? They remain persistently high and continues to climb. As I'm talking about those particular assets, their price will go high and they will remain high. They keep on going high. The price does not match towards the equilibrium price. What is the equilibrium price? It is the price which is set forward by the forces of demand and supply. So I mean to say that these demand and supply factors don't affect the price of that asset bubble. This is due to the mad increase in the supply of money and credit in the market. There's a lot of money. People are rich with money. They want to buy everything. Buyers have the money which allow them to bid for the prices higher and higher. They are ready to spend. Right? Now, the prices of these assets do not reflect the real conditions of supply and demand. Now, if the asset bubble is happening for one particular commodity, I cannot take that as a base to reflect the position of the market. They are not the true representatives of the conditions which are going on in the market. Like a snowball, the asset bubble feeds on itself. So this is what is happening for the last some time. The biggest asset bubble in the history have been followed by deep recessions. Whenever the asset bubble gets created, they are followed by deep recessions. And now the asset bubble has created. We all are waiting. This is just increasing and increasing. And the fear remains that if we take out the pages of history, after the asset bubbles, there do come a recession. The trouble comes up when this bubble bursts and deflates. When the graph goes on a downward trend, the bubble prices begin to fall back. The late buyers are the most disappointed. They were driven by the speculative optimism. See, what happens is if the prices are going higher and higher, new buyers will enter the market to earn money. So, if you are on a first come first serve basis, you may have blown up money. You may have earned profit. But the buyers who are entering in the market at a late interval, they are the most disappointed because the bubble has started to burst. They also wanted to make money as the first buyers did, but oops, they cannot. During the pandemic, we witnessed the price rise of some stock prices of certain companies. The markets were very high. The prices of those shares of those companies were soaring higher and higher. This was a bubble. Now the bubble has burst. Recently, in the month of May, the investors, they have lost $11 trillion globally. So this is what happens when the bubble bursts. Now, another factor is the global debt. See, the global debt covers the borrowings by the governments, the business and the households. The net total of all the borrowings come under the global debt. IMF warns that it is at dangerously high levels at this point of time. The global debt passed $300 trillion in the year 2021. The experts warn that the low-income countries and the households, they suffer the most from high debt levels once the debt increases. Who are the most ones to suffer in the low-income countries? It is the households and the countries like us. They are going to suffer the most. Borrowing was already surging before the pandemic, but the COVID and the Ukraine war has pushed the global debt to new highs. Just as I told you in the previous slide, the Ukraine war is just ushering suffering to all the nations. If the countries default on their debts, this would cause panic on the financial markets and the economic slowdowns. As we take the case of the business, they have to repay high level of debt, which indicates less money available to invest and expansion. Because much of your income, much of your revenue will be going back in the debt repayment. What is left to you? Literally nothing. If unable to repay the loans, the business may fear insolvency. And as the case of households, high level of debt can force them to cut some areas of spending, say food or fuel. See, the debt though has to be repaid by hook or by crook. For that, you have to arrange funds. And if you don't have funds, you have to cut down on your expenditure. The World Bank says that when low-income countries get into the trouble of debt trap, debt distress, this may be associated with protracted recession and high inflation. So this point is saying that we may go to recession and high inflation because we are caught in the debt trap. Inflation spikes when the central bank increases the interest rates to contain this. Rising interest rates means higher loan repayments. Now, why is the central bank increasing the interest rate? Because the central bank wants to control inflation. Once the interest rates are gone up, your EMI will go up. Once your EMI goes up, you will not be ready to take more loans, right? So this is how they want to combat inflation. In the nutshell, this global debt point is pointing towards the marching of recession. Next comes the black swan events. The black swan event is an extremely rare, unpredictable event that affects the whole world with severe consequences. Two big examples which we have lately faced is COVID-19 virus and the Russia's war on Ukraine. The sanctions put on Russia has put a supply stop of many articles, especially the oil, to the various countries of the world, and the prices are rising high. If you block the supply chain, we will land into trouble. But we have to. This has been happening. All such events, they derail the economy. The war triggered a global food shortage. The war only in Ukraine, but the impact everywhere in each and every corner of the world. The situation may go worse before it gets better. We have to find some days when the situation gets normal. The fuel crisis has pushed itself everywhere. Economic repercussions all over the world. This point, black swan events also take us towards the recession phase. Now, the recession not only affects the country's economy, but also creates social unrest. You know, when the people are not happy, they don't have the money. It is going to create social unrest behavior. There are labor strikes in many countries. In UK, there were strikes by the railway workers, the teachers, the postal workers. German too, doctors went on the strike. The workers in the France, they threatened to shut a refinery. South Korea too did not remain untouched. The truckers, they went on the strike. The common demand here is the increase in wages. The angry population is no good sign for any country. Now comes the United States effect. It's a very important point. So goes the saying that when US sneezes, the whole world catches cold. Whatever happens in the United States market, it gets reflected in the whole world. Why? Why does it happen? Because the US is the most powerful nation. Their economy is massive. US is the world's biggest economy, which holds top position in the total exports by any country and also the top position in the imports by any country. So it's really big. US is economic leader in the total GDP contribution to the world. In 2021, USA contributed 24.6% to the world's total nominal GDP. The world trade happens anywhere among two countries, it always happens in the US dollars. So USA is very important. Now, to predict the Indian scenario right now, we have to study the US economy, and the US economy does not sound that great at the present scenario. US is facing inflation due to the aftermath of COVID virus and the war in Ukraine. Another factor can be cited as the money printing, which happens to increase liquidity during the pandemic. The government resorted to money printing. The liquidity was also infused through the open market operations as well. US is experiencing inflation at a high rate. The consumer price index in May were 8.6% higher than a year earlier and the greatest increase since the year 1981. All these points to a potential recession. Recession seems inevitable, or maybe that we are living in it. Now, inflation and slowdown are moving towards us on a fast pace. We have to be very vigilant before our income gets reduced and the expenses get double up. Inflation trends on a high in India, America, Britain, and Germany. The wholesale price index in India is on the highest trend right now. The currencies are falling, the share markets are crashing all over the world. Although Indian share market is not doing that bad, touch wood, all these symptoms show the recession march. Now, what happens basically is the government also gives packages. When COVID happened, we all saw that even Mrs. Nirmala Sitaram also announced a lot of packages for the Indian economy. So did the US did. US also, they even transported money to the people's account just to overcome this COVID aftermath. Now, even if the country has been given, all these packages were announced, were they able to control inflation? And all the asset bubble discussed in the previous slide, what is it showing? Let us hope and pray that this remains a myth. The recession is just a myth for US and India. We pray that India comes out of it as the most strongest, most growing economy. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay blessed.